Welcome back to the Healthy Business Podcast. Jessica, how are you?
I'm doing good. How are
Yeah,
you?
good. Trying to work out these studio issues and technical difficulties that we're having so that we can get it set up and actually have, a great looking podcast instead of just a great sounding podcast.
I
And so,
actually love that we're doing that in real time
yeah,
because we're able to see the progression of learning, and that's exactly what makes your business healthy is understanding that you didn't start out, as we mentioned before, you didn't start out
sure.
as Amazon. You started out as the little thing and you had to grow.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so taking that first leap into something you don't really know a whole lot
Mhm.
about, maybe know a little bit, but yeah, you always run into to issues, and so like Apple, being an Apple person that I am now, Apple has a new operating system that will not cooperate with my current microphone, which is a really nice microphone. So it's a shame, and so now I'm having to figure out what do we need to do to set the system up so that we have good audio recording, of course, good visual. We've got lighting. But we have got a lot of shadows back here.
Well,
And so
if we decide we want to change to a shadow public podcast, we're
we
set.
can,
Yeah, we got
absolutely.
Plan B.
If you're good at that, you can do that. But for now, the shadows will kind of work and go along with the theme because it's the fall season.
It
It's
is.
October.
It is.
And so to go along with that, I thought maybe we could talk about some scary stories in
Oh,
business.
okay.
All right. We're leaning towards that edge, right?
Obviously, you've got one in mind because I'm going to take a minute to think about that.
No, I'm sure you can think off the top of your head of some scary different things that have happened to you in business. Of course, opening a business itself can be scary.
Oh, yeah.
And there's lots to think about, which is kind of the focus of what we talk about here. What makes a healthy business? How do you get started? How do you know when you're generating enough revenue to be sufficient and to grow? And there's just so many different things to think about in that area.
That is true.
So yeah, there's plenty of horror stories out there of businesses gone wrong or like moments where you just feel like you've stepped off the edge of a cliff and you're in free fall.
I don't know that I've had any horror stories, but I
Yeah.
can definitely tell you that I've had some horrific moments. When I first started my business, there was all the little struggles, and then I decided I was going to be a legit business and rent commercial space, and that is scary. It was. I'm not a real estate agent.
Yeah.
I've never been on the corporate side of anything. I've worked in the corporate industry, but somebody that I've never met rented the space. And going into the corporate world and having contracts and having to look over all the different lease agreements and things, it's something that I've rented apartments and it's never been that complicated. So it was horrifying.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I was just thinking, for me, I think the scariest times are like financially when you don't know how things are going to go,
Mhm.
and you don't know, when you sort of work for an employer, you kind of have this sense of like consistency and like reliability
Mhm.
of saying, okay, every month or every 2 weeks I get paid this amount. You can budget off of that.
Mhm.
But when you own your own business and you're relying on clients and customers to buy from you, you don't really know. Yeah, I mean, you don't have that that sort of feeling of being set in concrete. You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
it's
until
sort of
you get those reoccurring clients where you're
yeah,
having that monthly income on contract, you may be going from client to client. You may have, well, during COVID, my
right,
licensure was shut down completely, and I was not able to make any money during that shutdown.
right,
It was, I mean, I would have been breaking the law, so that was scary. That was
yeah,
that. I think I blocked it out.
yeah,
That was terrifying to be able to not know when I was going back to work, when I was going to start
sure,
generating income again. I still had expenses. I still had to pay rent. I still had to, eat. So that was really scary to be able to, at that point, to not know where that next paycheck, so to speak, is coming from.
right, and then not being sort of no relief in that. You know what I mean? There was no special government package for people that were providing health services that were couldn't get clients anymore, and so like you sort of had to rely on your own entrepreneurship
Mhm.
and your own ideas of trying to generate.
Well, they did have the gig worker thing where I was able to get unemployment for a little bit,
Yeah.
but I actually, because the way my business was moving and growing, I was in a sweet spot of not being available, or I didn't qualify for any of the PPE.
Yeah.
Or the PPP loans. I didn't qualify for any of that. So it was just me and my emergency fund and a couple of weeks of unemployment.
Right. Absolutely. And so I think the very first, I think, scariest thing about opening a business for me. And my first, digital marketing company was when I was still working a day job, making bills, you know what I mean, making all the ends meet, providing for my family, that type of thing. But realizing, I didn't have enough time to do all that, to work all day long, and then come home and then work on my business on the side, and like I don't have any time for anything else, and I'm so tired.
Well, and you've got a kid, so
Oh gosh, yeah,
there's the running your own business will take its toll on your family, and there's a point at which you sometimes have to give it extra.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to realize when to pull back.
Right.
And you hear a lot of businesses or business books talk about the work-life balance, and you have to. It's not. I mean, and at the end of the day, the balance sheet works out. But there may be times that you go for a week at a time, and you just see your spouse in passing.
Yeah.
And that's part of it. You have to be okay. I'm good, but it also needs to be temporary.
Sure, and finding the balance in that. The first entrepreneurship program that I went through in order to learn about all the different aspects of business, like they had all these interviews with these other entrepreneurs, and one of them I specifically remember because he started his own garage. He was working for somebody else, working on cars, and then he would go to his own house and open his own garage as a small business, and like he had grown it over the years to be several locations with many employees, you know what I mean? It was great. And so, but in the meantime, while he was building and working a day job and then his business on nights and weekends, like he was missing all the moments with his family. You know what I mean? He was talking about how he had to miss Christmas, like his kids opening presents in the house because he was in the garage working on cars, trying to build the business. And I was like, I'm not going to do that. You know what I mean? If that's what it takes, then I would just work for somebody else. But there's sacrifice, but there's also balance. You don't want to miss the major moments and that type of thing. So, but for me, trying to figure out, how to balance time, and then, when it came time where I was getting enough clients to where I could step away from my day job, that was probably the scariest thing I've ever done as far as business wise. Just saying I can provide. And it may not be as much as I would make at my day job, but I'm pretty sure I can get enough clients to grow this and be able to provide, for me and my family even more if I just quit this day job and focus solely on this, entrepreneurship.
That's an interesting point, and actually, it's a topic I want to unpack a little bit. There is a false sense of security in having a job, having a real job, being an employee. We have this understanding that this person's going to pay us every week. They're going to provide us with this health insurance policy. They're matching our 401k.
Yeah.
And all that sounds really great, and it gives us that sense of security. But in reality, we can actually do better without that security.
Right.
We can do better with our health insurance oftentimes. The way that the health insurance has changed now, we can actually sometimes go out and get different policies, get separate policies from our family, get independent things that will cost us less, and possibly even have better coverage than an employer-provided policy. As same thing with investing. And that employer is still, even if you're working for a big company, that employer still has to get that next customer and that next deposit in order to pay your paychecks. They're struggling with the things that, as an entrepreneur, you would be struggling with.
Right.
So there is that sense of security that you're leaving, but if you step back and think about it, it's not as secure as we like to think it is.
Not nearly. You don't realize that until you actually own a business of your own. You're like, whoa, now I'm in the boss's position, and now I realize what they were going through in order to give me that false sense of security of knowing that I was going to get a paycheck every month. Yes. So, that's pretty scary, just making that first step of quitting the day job and knowing when the right time is for that, and then just taking that leap of faith to try to
getting the paradigm shift and going for it.
Yeah, for sure. But there's a period of just free falling, like you're just falling off the side of a building, hoping a net catches you at any moment.
Sadly, that free fall can last for weeks.
Sometimes it's a long fall. Yeah.
And sometimes you bounce off an awning and go again.
I'm safe. No, not yet. Yeah, so that's absolutely one of the scariest things. I think another one would be for me investing. Nowhere to invest in my business. to grow it, like what is the best thing I need to do? Do I need to invest more in my software that I'm using? Am I supposed to hire a CPA? Should I join this club or that thing? Or everybody, when you're a business owner, you start getting hundreds and thousands of emails per month from all these different businesses that they say that they have the number one solution for you. All you need is this one thing, and you can just sit back and relax and just watch the money. Yeah, watch your bank account just tremendously overflow.
Right.
And so, like, cutting through the bull crap and trying to figure out where would be the best
not
place
being
for me to put
distracted
money.
by the shiny baubles, not being
Yes.
distracted by the good advertising,
Yeah.
Being able to decide what's right for your business. Just because you may have the same type of business as someone else doesn't mean that you're in the same market, doesn't mean that you're offering the same exact product, doesn't mean that you're targeting the same audience.
Right.
So what worked for them was to sell a book.
Right.
And that may or may not work for you.
For sure. And even at a time where I really wasn't making enough to, I was making, ends meet, without any like throwing away money, so I didn't have a whole lot of that. I didn't have Vegas money, but taking some of that I earned and trying to invest in the right things so that I could grow my business. And I think one of the best things I did was, the first time I joined a chamber of commerce, but I joined the one that was in my town at the time that I was living in. And so if you imagine like Wayward Pines or, any of those types of, those little towns like that, it's that kind of place. And I joined the Chamber of Commerce thinking that, well, it's a Chamber of Commerce. This is what they do, but it turns out, not all of them are cut from the same cloth. They're all different. They're all different beasts. And so I got one little ribbon cutting and, maybe 10 people showed up, local businesses that really didn't even understand what digital marketing was anyway. And so it never really led to anything else. And there was nothing going on with the chamber. And so it was like, well, that's just money I spent that was down the drain.
Yeah, there is an idea that you have to join local, and that doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to be the best target for you. I mean, I think one of the things that we were talking about earlier is you were based out of Conway for the longest time, and most of your clients were here in Little Rock. Yeah. And it's not a very long drive, but it's a very different demographic.
Yeah, it definitely is. Very different mindset, demographic, different kinds of businesses, and just, altogether how they run their businesses and like how people interact here. It's very, very different from where I was. And so I ended up joining of course, the North Little Rock Chamber, and that's where I ended up meeting you, and have grown. It just that one time of putting that money forward into something that had just been like, okay, well, this is the only way I'm going to be able to meet other business owners and be able to get in the professional world. You know what I mean? So I was dropped that down, even though I was like, if I don't earn this back, like I'm screwed.
Right.
And so yeah,
we don't get to eat next week.
I don't get to eat, but I'm gonna go ahead and try this. And so did that and ended up putting the energy forward and networking and growing and meeting more people, which had led to more clients and then them referring me to other people and referrals. And so it's grown to what I call success. You know what I mean, from where I started. So. I'm not a $1 million baller yet, but we're doing
that's one of the things that I think is important about our focus in this podcast is not so much giving you the one blueprint for making $1 billion in your checking account and not having to do anything, but giving you a little more of an idea of what's out there, because you don't know what you don't know.
Sure.
And you're right. I came out as a new business, and I'm thinking, okay, Chamber of Commerce, sure, let's do that. Well, It wasn't exactly the best thing for my business,
right?
But I had no idea, and I also had no idea what a chamber was. I assumed it was a certain thing, and they were all the same, and they're actually just a business. It's not a government agency, and I had no idea. I just thought it was Secretary of State Chamber of Commerce. So I like the idea that we're unpacking some ideas that can give people tools to go outside of their existing knowledge base.
And hopefully, let them get it. If you haven't tried or gotten into it, like if you had known that before, that it wasn't just a necessary part of, being registered with the state, that you join a Chamber of Commerce because you have to. Like, it's like, no, that's not the case at all. But yeah, I hope shedding some light on that for people that haven't been exposed to any of those things, or they haven't really gotten into, like, there's no definitive list of what you should do when you open a business. Obviously, you have to register with the state and then get your EIN number. But those are the only two things that you really have to do unless you're doing like selling at the farmer's market. You know what I mean?
Well, and I think that's another thing is that you are. At what point do you go from the farmer's market with just being Bob's Produce to going and getting the EIN to getting the
right.
We all have to start somewhere, and I think a lot of people are like, oh well, I just do the thing, and in reality, if you're happy there,
mm-hmm.
by all means.
Right.
But if you really want to have a vision and possibly grow, what steps do you need to take now as the farmer's market guy to prepare your business for growth? Yeah. Because it's not just about, I'm going to go ahead and jump in, I'm going to get a $10,000 business loan and I'm starting it. It might just be, let's do some networking now. Let's go ahead and get a Facebook page, or let's go ahead and get some business cards made, or what little things can you do that are cheap and free now that are going to put you on the right path for that growth when you're ready.
Yeah, for sure. And having a vision of like, where do you want to take this? Like, how big do you think you can make it? I mean, are you already getting enough customers to be able to do this type of thing? I mean, can you see yourself in the projected future being able to grow to where you're providing, your products not only at the farmer's market but at the stores and the online sales, which is very easy to do now. You can start an e-commerce store. Are people going to be interested in that? And so, yeah.
But not getting us so overwhelmed with that future that you stall today.
Right.
So,
exactly. Don't be stalled out. But if you're not really, if you've got your jars of honey that at the farmer's market and they're not really selling, there's really no point in like going ahead and registering your business yet, because you want to make sure that the
building a $5,000 website
so supply and demand. And so if the demand isn't there, but you got plenty of supply, we need to figure out some new things to do.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that you can't. It just means that whatever you're doing right now isn't putting you on that path.
Oh yeah, for sure. So yeah, like there's no definitive of like time when to do that. I mean, it's sort of felt out, and there's like ways of knowing, when to take those steps. And like I said, it's terrifying whenever you first do it, especially if you've never done it before, or if you've done it before and like your business didn't fail. Always take those lessons that you learned from before and apply it to now. And I mean, the most invaluable piece of advice I could ever give anybody is talk to other people who have been through it.
Talk to them, but don't take it as law.
Yeah.
I've had people go, well, if you don't do this one, then you're going to fail.
Well, that's, So not everybody's case is the same. But, I mean, you can still learn from somebody else
100%.
and be like, they went through this nightmare. I'm going to avoid that by doing this.
Or I'm going to watch for these signals or these signs.
Right.
For sure.
Exactly. Or I've heard stories about this type of
client.
I don't want to do that. Right. I know how this goes. I mean, you watch enough scary movies. I'm a big in October. Like, I just watch horror movies all the time, me and my wife. And so it's like, if you're home alone and it's dark, somebody calls you on the phone and they tell you they're watching you through the window, probably shouldn't go through the front door. Don't go. There's rules to these things.
Right?
You know what I mean?
Oh, and always look up.
Yes, always look up. Yes, exactly. So you hear enough of those stories from other business owners, and you're like, okay, I know what to do here because these are the things that are going to get me killed. I don't need to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and that, to another point that segues actually, networking is not about selling your business. It's not about going, hey, I have a widget, you need to buy it.
Right.
Networking is about learning about other people's businesses and learning what they've done and what they've done well and what they've not done well, and how you can use that information to grow your business, and then you establish that trust, and then you've got a customer. So people think that they have to go to these chamber meetings or the leads meetings or any of those types of things, and they walk in with their business card and they're ready to take orders. In reality, they have to come in and learn and share their information. For
sure. And I have a few stories.
Okay. I need to prepare.
So, yes, I came a little bit prepared this time. And I'm reading these from entrepreneur.com. These are some horror stories from other businesses, just real short. Things to be aware of, and like I said, learning from other people, things that they've been through. You're probably not selling the type of stuff that they're selling. You're probably not in the same position they were. I mean, everybody's different. But being able to take these as lessons for you in the future. Let's see. This one was from Chris Kane of Bounce Boards. He said, I attended a very important trade show in Colorado that had a very rough start. I arrived at the convention center the evening before the show to set up my booth. When I arrived at my booth, the pallet containing all my materials was not there. I asked around, and the floor manager said that my pallet was sent back to storage and that I would not be able to retrieve it until the next morning. I got up early the next day and walked over to the convention center around 5 a.m. When arrived, the security guards would not let me in on the floor, and the floor manager was nowhere to be found, so I was escorted to the security office. After the run around by security, I walked over to the warehouse to retrieve the pallet. The first forklift operator who offered to help looked out for 20 minutes and then couldn't find it. It was now 6:30 a.m. and I was starting to panic, but my pallet never made it to the convention center from our office. It was an awful feeling. Finally, someone radioed in that they had found it. I received the pallet late and worked like crazy to get everything set up in time. Thankfully, the rest of the 4-day trade show went smoothly and was a success. So for that, I mean, if you are preparing, let's say specifically for an event, and I'm going to have these products that I'm going to sell, but then you don't have the products on the time that you've already paid for at your booth, I mean, what do you do?
Well, I think that there's twofold on that. You can talk about ways that you can, maybe you should have come early, maybe you should have, there's some things that you could have done to prevent that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the biggest takeaway is that he didn't shut down. He didn't panic.
Right.
And although he felt terrible, he was running around you couldn't catch a break, as we sometimes say, and kept hitting brick walls. He didn't quit. He kept pushing forward and just, okay, we're going to take that in stride and keep going. He didn't just go into the hotel and drink and wait till it finished to be over. And that's a big thing about entrepreneurship is you have to just take those licks. You got to take it on the chin and keep going.
Yeah. And if you are a super micromanager like I am, like if I'm in this position, I'm going to figure out a way that I can transport that myself. I'm not going to rely on anybody else. I don't care if I have to rent a U-Haul and load the pallet in there and then go to the hotel and keep it there overnight. You know, I'm going to make sure that I have everything in place beforehand. Of course, you have to trust other people, but I'm saying it's in order to avoid big disasters like that, I'm going to make sure that I have things set and ready before and make sure I have my hand on it to make sure
or do
it's
your
gonna
best
be
to
there.
do so.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. Okay. This one's from Logan Lenz, who is the founder and president of Indigon. People often say, don't count your chickens before they hatch. As a young entrepreneur, you tend to overlook such popular phrases and categorize them as irrelevant cliches. Until, of course, you experience such a catastrophic event stemming from an assumption and sheer hope. In my case, my company was just getting off the ground, but had a lot of incredible ideas. One investor expressed so much interest that he insisted we begin taking the necessary steps to position us for success. One of these items was obtaining an expensive office space in a desirable location. I became so excited by the investor's charisma that I took his intentions and ran with them, albeit too quickly in retrospect. Before even closing the deal for his investment, a much more naive version of myself fronted the initial deposits and then procured the office space. I also bought some materials that would be needed to operate at the scale that we discussed. The investor, after a few weeks, it became clear the investment was never going to finalize, and I was stuck having to sublease the oversized office to someone else.
That's a very common mistake that people make. They bite off
Right.
what they can chew. They get prepared. They think that, okay, I'm going to be nationwide in 2 weeks.
Exactly. Don't spend money that you don't have in your hand. That's the more key.
You know, it's funny because growing up, I heard the phrase, don't you count chickens before they hatch.
Yes.
And I knew what it meant. But until having chickens, I didn't really know what it meant.
Yes.
All the eggs don't always hatch.
Right.
Even though, you can have a dozen fertilized eggs and you may get 8, 10 out of it. So that is a very big thing. I see that a lot in business when I work with young therapists that are coming out and they're starting out. They're like, I need this space, I need this fancy table, I need this extra thing over here, and it's like, no, you need your degree and your license and
Right.
2 hands and willingness to work, and then from there you can then scale up.
Well, you think of, you see other businesses or people in your field, and you're like, well, they have this, so I've got to have that. And it sets you on a path of just trying to replicate what they have. And if you're just trying to replicate what somebody else has anyway, why are you?
Get a franchise.
Yeah, exactly. Get a franchise. Exactly. Buy a Taco Bell. But to invest in things that you don't necessarily need and you don't have the money for just yet, it's a really dumb idea to do that. Yeah. Put you in a bad position and could financially bankrupt you.
Yes.
Which is never fun. And this is the last one we're going to read here, and probably the scariest of all to most people. This one is from Aaron Schwartz, who is the founder and CEO of Modify Watches. He said, in 2013, I was in Austin during one of the college basketball games for March Madness. I received a call from a teammate who was frantic. She had just been served with a lawsuit. I stepped outside and immediately called our lawyer, Doug. We thought the suit was frivolous. We had created a set of custom watches for a major technology company in Silicon Valley. They used these for sale to their superfans. We used the logo that they had provided, put it on the watch, and that was that. Or so we thought. Turns out that we had used a trademark term. The watch company out of Florida sued our startup as well as the tech company. To us, this was the same as if someone had put a trademark term on a Hanes shirt. Certainly you wouldn't sue Hanes. The big company refused to indemnify us. After a terrible few months, with the fear of going out of business and lots of legal fees, we eventually paid a large sum to settle.
Wow, that's a risk.
Yeah,
for sure. You don't necessarily know. Let's say that you're a mom and pop and you're making custom cups, and someone gives you, hey, I want you to put my name on a cup, and
yes.
here's the artwork, and you're like, okay, so you put it in your computer and you put it on. Well,
right.
What protections do you have?
Right.
Do you need it when you're really, really small? Maybe, maybe not. But you might be running into a situation like this where you're actually infringing on a company that has deep pockets and big lawyers. Mm-hmm. In which case, you don't necessarily have to invest a bunch of money up front to get a lawyer on retainer. But you need to be thinking about how you might run your business, what your backup plan would be if you do find yourself in that situation.
Right, for sure. And people do not play when you use their name or their logo without their permission. They will mm-hmm. come after you because they do have the lawyers to mm-hmm. do that. So being very cautious. There's nothing wrong with partnering with other companies, but make sure that your attorney looks over all the contracts and paperwork before you print a single thing. There's mm-hmm. nothing wrong with tagging somebody in a Facebook post or something like that. That's different. But if you're actually printing or making some sort of statement to the public, you release a press release announcing something that you guys had talked about in passing. You're up to be sued.
Intellectual property is just as a dangerous pathway sometimes as actual tangible property.
For sure. It can create a complete nightmare for you, your business, and everybody involved, everybody around you. It's never fun to be sued or to sue someone else. I mean, it sounds great. You're getting a lot of money, but you're putting people through a hard time. Mm-hmm. But I mean, sometimes it's necessary if they're defamation and that type of thing.
For sure. There's times when that seems to be an outlet, but there's also times when it's not. And that's another thing in business that you have to navigate. They end up settling. Maybe right. They were in the right. Maybe they could have fought it if they had deeper pockets. But at the end of the day, the only people that make money in that situation are the lawyers.
Oh yeah, for sure. The lawyers are winning every time. So it doesn't. Yeah, either way, you win or lose a case, you're still making a profit off of that. So, it's amazing. So yeah, any other horror stories you want to share?
I can think of right now. I've been pretty blessed in my business. I had a corporate background, so that gave me a lot of groundwork. And I've also been really open to new ideas. Yeah. And that's definitely helped me along the way. So I'm very excited to be able to share some of the positive things that have gone through in my business, right. So other people can learn from my successes as well as the failures.
Right. How about a nightmare client? What do you do when you're in a contract with a nightmare client?
You have to decide where you are in your business and whether the nightmare is worth it. I have a client, God love her, she's a nightmare. She's a very particular person. She likes things a certain way. She is a holdover from when I first started my business, and I've completely changed my methodology, and she doesn't fit in my new category. But I keep her around because she is my humbling client. She reminds me that I'm not as great as a lot of people think I am. Mm-hmm. And it's very easy to do really well for a lot of clients. Everyone's, oh, you're so wonderful. And I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of wonderful. And every once in a while, you need to be cut down a little bit. And so I keep this client to do that. And I know it's my own little tool that I use. But when I see her, I'm like, oh, yeah, I have to humble myself and then
Mhm.
remind myself that other people don't necessarily like everything. Other people aren't always going to love me. Other people, I mean, she does it her own special way. Otherwise, she would
Right.
keep coming back. But I take her criticism because it helps me stay humble.
Right.
So if you have a nightmare client, you can do one of two things. If you can turn into a positive, like I have done with this particular nightmare
Yeah.
client, that's great. If you can't, walk away. No,
Sure.
no commission, no sale is worth the negative that can come from a nightmare client.
For sure.
It's okay to not be a good fit. There are several times I've had potential clients come up and they say, I want, an X, Y, and Z. I'm like, yeah, we're not a good fit. Well, here's a list of competitors that will be a better fit. And it's not because they're a bad person. It's just it's not a good fit. And so I don't feel like I'm getting rid of a bad client. I'm just getting rid of a client that just doesn't fit into my organization.
Right. I sort of use those as learning lessons too, of
Mhm.
like, okay, well, this is what I need to do in the future. If I take on a client and then they want just continuous revisions over and over and over until I'm spending most of my time working on this one project that, they've already paid me for it, but I didn't set a limit in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
It's like next time I need to have it in the paperwork in the beginning. You get 3 revisions tops, you know what I mean? Let's make them count every single time, because being respectful of my time and also being respectful of your time,
Mhm.
and how we can work together to actually make this project work, rather than just come in here and terrorize me, making sure you're stealing every hour of my day.
Absolutely. Well, and learn, like you said, learning from that. That's the biggest thing is you don't have to keep the client, but you can definitely learn from that. You learn to now you have a limit on your revisions. You've learned to articulate certain things. If you take all of those things that aren't great about that experience and you learn from it and you modify your procedures in the future so that you don't attract another client just like that, then, at the end of the day, be thankful that you had them.
Right? Absolutely. So to keep your business becoming a ghost, I'd say those are some things to learn and be aware of, and to apply to your business. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Don't want to. It's going to be scary. You're going to have scary moments, and that's just inevitable. It's going to happen.
Yes.
It's going to happen. But yeah, as long as you're aware of those key things, and that's not all of them. I'm sure we haven't covered tons of, and it's specific to each industry.
Oh yeah. Well,
Yeah, this is just general.
As the podcast develops, we'll actually take these ideas and go just dig a little deeper into them and provide some more value resources that you can go to afterwards. But right now, we're really just filling out the different things that we're going to be talking about and giving you guys an experience of what we're experiencing. We know where we're coming from, so we have a authority in the conversation.
Awesome. Well, thanks for talking with me, Jessica.
Thank you, Ty.
Yeah. If you are a audio listener, you can absolutely see this as a video on YouTube, and if you are a video watcher, then you can listen to us on podcast services around the globe on your chosen podcast distributor, such as Podbean and Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, so on and so on and so on and so on. There's so many of them out there now, but we put it out on everything, so that's the good thing. And until next time, just keep your business healthy.